snipers, bodyguards armed with handguns that can punch through body armor, helicopter gunships, and trained attack bears. We only made one of those up, but the protection of the president of Russia is absolutely insane. The American president has the Secret Service, and his counterpart in Russia has their own elite bodyguard unit, the Presidential Security Service. Part of the Federal Protective Service, this arm of the Russian government is responsible for protecting high-ranking Russian government figures and has a whopping 50,000 employees. The PSS, though, is only responsible for protecting the Russian president and prime minister, and they are very good at their job. Much of the way the PSS operates is similar to the way the American Secret Service operates, but this isn't copycatting, it's simply because the fundamentals of security don't change no matter what country you're in. However, the PSS has at least one additional requirement that the American Secret Service doesn't when dealing with the president as image-conscious as Vladimir Putin. Long before the Russian president steps foot on a plane to a new meeting or a vacation spot, his security team is already hard at work. Every single destination needs to be thoroughly checked for a wide variety of potential threats, and this includes every single road to be traveled and potential stop or visit. The first threat analyzed is the criminal one. A large number of organized crime syndicates would profit greatly from the abduction or even assassination of a government leader. Just imagine what Mexican cartels would do to get their hands on the American president. Thus, the Russian president's security detail meticulously analyzes the criminal threat to the president directly, or to any asset the president might be using during his travels. The last thing Putin's security detail wants is to accidentally travel down a road well known for frequent gun battles between rival criminal gangs, even if they probably seriously outgun any street gang on planet Earth. Next on the agenda is analyzing any potential for social unrest. The president's security detail will work to make sure that any potential travel route or visit avoids locations that are potentially hotspots for citizen unrest. Imagine what might happen if Xi Jinping had traveled through Hong Kong during the massive riots that rocked the city, or if the American president's travel plans had included a road trip through the city of Ferguson during its own social unrest. However, this part of the screening process includes analyzing the potential for social unrest actually inspired by the president himself. Putin has proven to be a particularly divisive figure in Russia and frequently the target of ire by pro-democracy groups, LGBTQ rights activists, and women's rights activists. Once, Putin was accosted by feminist protesters during a visit to Hanover. While it's doubtful the protesters would have caused any actual harm, his bodyguards were immediately on hand to ensure Putin wasn't harmed or potentially embarrassed. Safeguarding the president from social unrest he may inspire himself includes carefully vetting any visitors or attendees to events Putin goes to, and even blacklisting individuals or groups from participating. Next is analyzing the possibility of natural disasters in the area the president might be visiting. This is done by looking at historical data and gaining access to good long-range weather forecasting. Some natural disasters can be easily predicted, or at least given a good probability of occurring or not. This includes seasonal events such as flooding and typhoons. Others, however, are completely unpredictable, such as earthquakes, or Kylie Jenner dropping her own album. In either case, the president's protection detail needs to have a well-established contingency plan that includes the capability to escape a natural disaster entirely before or after it struck. If escape is impossible, the protection detail must have the necessary tools to shelter in place while the Russian military enacts a plan to extract the president. Lastly is a concern unique to Russia's current and very image-conscious Vladimir Putin. The last thing the president detail can let happen is to let the Russian president be assassinated. The second to last thing is to let him look foolish. For Vladimir Putin, this is especially important, as the current Russian president has worked to carefully cultivate a strong, manly image through various photo shoots, which include him suntanning in the Russian wilderness, riding a horse shirtless, joining an underwater research excursion, swimming in a wild Russian lake, and hunting shirtless for some reason. While these photo shoots have been very successful at growing his popularity with segments of the Russian population, other Russians have fought back by making Vladimir Putin the most memeable world leader. Thus, the Presidential Protective Service has to be ever conscious of how a visit could affect the Russian president's public image. A month out from a potential visit, security experts inspect the location and especially the accommodations where the president will be staying. The location is carefully checked for any potential security vulnerabilities, and any employees are carefully vetted by the security team. Lastly, every single item inside the president's accommodations is inspected and repaired well before his arrival. That way, during the stay, there is no need for any technician or repairman to visit. With just a few weeks before the president's stay, technical experts install radio and cell signal jammers. These devices will help prevent any potential IEDs or planted explosives from being detonated via radio or cell phone. However, it also helps to ensure the president isn't potentially spied on by hidden electronics that a sweep might have missed. Unique to the Russian president's security detail is the ability to ping any and all smart devices in proximity to where the president is expected to stay or travel. Russian laws allow the president's security team to use tapping hardware and software on any electronic device they believe will be in proximity to the president. They're also given the authority to execute body searches without the same legal restrictions a police officer might have, gain access to absolutely any building or organization, and seize any vehicle they may deem necessary for the protection of the president or that might pose a threat. So, who gets to protect one of the most powerful men in the world? First, you must be over 21 but younger than 35 at the time of application. You also have to be able to complete a stringent physical exam, so only those in peak physical shape should even think of applying. Next, you must be between 175 and 190 centimeters, so that you're physically large enough to shield the president with your own body, but not so tall as to experience difficulty in tight physical confines or draw attention to yourself. The requirements to join the Presidential Security Service are surprisingly similar to that of the American Secret Service. Combat experience is not required, and in fact, good candidates are more defensively minded than offensive. That's because, as explained by a former Presidential Security Service employee, a soldier is meant to attack, but a bodyguard is meant to defend and protect. Being a presidential bodyguard can be much more challenging than being a soldier, as most of the threats that a Presidential Security Service member will face are going to be clandestine. A good candidate must have an excellent attention to detail and only the best of situational awareness. Any member in a crowd can be a potential attacker, and even the sweet old lady waiting in line to shake the president's hand could be carrying a hidden gun in her purse. A good bodyguard must keep an eye on a wide variety of potential threat vectors, and yet remain aware enough to react to a completely unexpected threat. Even more important, though, is the psychological component. A president's bodyguard's job is not to apprehend or eliminate an attacker, but to protect the president, even at the cost of their own life. Thus, while a normal police officer or soldier might have the instinct to neutralize an attacker first, a Russian president's bodyguard will instead put themselves between the president and the threat even before drawing their pistol. This is why defensive thinking is more important than offensive thinking. The Presidential Security Service must also be well-versed in different languages, given the Russian president's frequent travel abroad. This is so agents can understand if any threat is present in the area by listening to and understanding the conversations of the locals. Next, they must have a good sense for proper etiquette in politics while remaining tactful at all times. In this video, a security team member tactfully asks UFC fighter Conor McGregor to remove his arm from around Putin's shoulder. A big no-no that could have caused an embarrassing public incident if the bodyguard had overreacted. This is also why only calm and level-headed individuals are allowed to guard the most powerful man in Russia. The last thing President Putin needed here was an over-anxious bodyguard making a scene with a major public figure like McGregor. We have to admit, though, the entire staff of the infographic show would love to have seen a Russian presidential bodyguard go toe-to-toe with a UFC champion, and our money is on the bodyguard. That's because of the incredible training they undergo. Details are very scarce given the secrecy of the Russian government, but it's known that much like their American counterparts, Russian presidential bodyguards are experts in hand-to-hand combat and have incredible stamina and tolerance for extreme heat and cold. Even the coldest conditions, these men must be able to tolerate the weather in only light overcoats, since heavy overcoats would hinder their agility and ability to move quickly. Rumors even have it that the Russian presidential bodyguards take a variety of drugs that directly affect their physiology. This could include the use of amphetamines for alertness, or perhaps even human growth hormones or steroids to increase strength and endurance. Again, given the secrecy of the Russian government, these remain only rumors. But would you really be surprised to learn that Vladimir Putin is protected by a team of bodyguards jacked up on experimental super soldier serums? While the president is out and about, the PSS operates almost exactly as the American Secret Service. First, the president is closely protected by a team of elite bodyguards who are ever present and within feet of him at all times. These men are trained to put themselves directly in the path of an attacker and take a bullet for the Russian president if necessary. As such, they carry body armor under their suits or jackets, and even carry special bulletproof briefcases which can be used as shields. They also carry well-concealed handguns capable of punching through body armor at a range of up to 50 meters, and submachine guns. Sometimes they even carry Kevlar umbrellas, which can protect from bullets and shrapnel. Next is the president's second circle of protection, arguably the most important. These individuals are usually invisible and don't look like government agents at all. That's because they're trained to blend into crowds so as to ascertain threats from within. They'll dress like regular civilians and work the crowd, identifying troublemakers and radioing their teammates about potential threats or individuals to be concerned about. They're also meant to act before an attacker has even had a chance to threaten the president. An individual suddenly shoving others out of the way might just be an overeager fan or a deranged gunman, and it's the second circle's job to neutralize them before they get a chance to threaten the president. The third circle of protection works along the perimeter of the crowd and carefully checks for threats from the outside. These agents will be dressed like their comrades, both to identify them as security detail members, but also to make themselves a threat and discourage an attack. If the president's security detail is highly visible and in large numbers, it can act as a visual deterrent, discouraging a would-be attacker by making them believe they'd just fail anyway. The fourth circle of protection is made up of elite spotters and snipers situated in tactically advantageous points around the president's location. Their job is not just to keep an eye on the crowd and act accordingly, but even more importantly to act as counter-snipers, as the greatest threat to the president is going to come from a sniper. The president's own snipers have to be able to identify the most likely threat vectors for a sniper attack and keep tabs on them, and act to accurately and immediately neutralize any threat. Lastly, the Russian president is typically escorted by a special unit of heavily armed security personnel. These heavies are responsible for extracting the president from any potential situation or for neutralizing a heavily militarized threat to the president. They're capable of protecting not just from a human threat, but of employing anti-tank and anti-aircraft weapons to protect against heavy vehicles and airborne threats. Now go check out CIA versus KGB, which was better during the Cold War, or click this other video instead.